Hello and welcome to my Combat Engineer Guide. Today we'll be going over the basics of how to be a combat engineer effectively and how to help your team win as a combat engineer. One of the first things you need to know as a combat engineer is the type of combat engineer you can be. There are three types. There is the FOB or backline engineer. That's very common. You focus on creating the FOB like here. You secure the backline, and you also secure miners, which are used to get income for requisitions who can then send you more supplies like special weapons or more engineering materials. The second type of engineer is the frontline engineer. This is a rare kind that doesn't care about income or the FOB and instead takes all of their starting supplies and uses it to set up barricades at the front. This is actually one of the more important roles of combat engineer, but due to how the game works, most people are the first type of engineer instead of the second. Lastly, and the most rare type of engineer is the engineer who focuses on demolitions. They use up all the points on det packs, C4s, etc. I'm not going to go over that because you need to be really good at the game at that point to understand how to effectively use a very limited amount of resources that combat engineers can get at the start in order to get the most amount of kills. Plus, I myself aren't even well versed in that type of engineer, so I wouldn't be able to explain it that well compared to others. First of all, we're going to go over the first role that you are going to be doing as a combat engineer, which is one of the most important roles, which is being a backline or FOB engineer. As a backline or FOB engineer, your job is to set up the FOB. And there's a couple things you need to understand when it comes to the FOB. You need to have a clear path of movement for all of the Marines. What does that mean? For example, you need to be able to rapidly set up barricades such as plasteel, but have it in two-way rows. This is so that Marines can enter and exit rapidly while in combat. So for example, say that you have these two here and you're fighting Xenos here, but there's somebody else behind you in the cage as well. This two-way barricade system allows you to enter and exit rapidly so that you have a safe area to retreat to. The problem with cades like this is the fact that only one person can enter and exit at the same time, which allows a window of avenue for Xenos to warrior grab you or strike to punch you away from cades, and then you're dead, possibly forever. That's why you want to have 2x2 cades like this. You also want to ensure all flanks are covered, but at the same time in a way that Marines can fight back in. For example, I'm going to make a quick cade here, just as a demonstration of this cade here is very good as a starter cade. It allows you to shoot back, and Xenos can't abuse these cades very well. They have to actually commit to an attack in order to deal damage to the cades, which allows you to fire back at them. However, let me show you a bad cade. So, say for instance, you've caded here. You have limited space to fight back in, and at the same time, you open yourself up for retaliation here. You can get warrior grabbed. Xenos can easily just go and slash and then hide from combat, which makes it so that you can't actually defend your barricades. It makes it a very useless barricade because of that. And also it makes you susceptible for being captured or killed near your cades. There's not much else when it comes to being a combat engineer. I mean, there's a few advanced tips, but this is the basics. The second thing though that you need to do as a backline engineer is to secure your logistics. By that, for example, in LZ1, this is Big Red, and there's a 4-on miner right here. 4-on miners every 2 or so minutes give requisitions points, which can be used to buy more materials, special weapons, special armor. And this is important because as the game progresses, you'll lose more and more Marines, which means every Marine has to be stronger individually. And the only way to do this is through logistics, which is requisitions. So hence the backlines engineer's secondary role is to capture these miners with either, and you also have to make sure there's a basic barricade set up here in order to ensure that no random Xeno can walk up and destroy it, because foreign miners are very vulnerable to being destroyed. I mean, being a backline and FOB engineer is pretty simple in design, but it gets complex when you really get into it, so I'm not going to go through that. The second role, and one of the other important roles that engineers have, is to be a frontline engineer. So for example, here let's say that we are pushing through the hospital. We've taken down some areas here, but then we're stuck in this area here. This is a very popular choke that Xenos like to abuse because of the multiple flanking routes that can be abused, such as here and here. So one of the things that you need to do as an engineer is set up an area here for Marines to rest in. The front line here should have proper barricades. So for example here, you won't want to have 2 plasticades if you can afford it, because in this situation, if you have to retreat, you need to have double cades here. And here, just this simple cade here, even if you don't cade the front here or do up here as well, you just secured the entire front here for quite a while. Even if they do a major flank, these cades will hold enough for Marines to be able to set up a counterattack or retreat. That's why frontline engineers are some of the most important engineers, but also one of the most difficult, because you usually have very few resources to use, which means you have to be very very smart with how you use your resources. For example, I could set up a cade here, or I can simply weld this airlock instead, and that will serve as a temporary measure against any flanking maneuvers. I didn't use up any materials, but I did the same thing that a cade would have done. And in fact, this is actually better in the long run, because the only way to open this is either warrior taking a long time to destroy it manually, or through an acid cast, pouring acid on here. That's honestly the very basics of being a combat engineer. A lot of what you do is going to be picked up on the field, because a lot of being a combat engineer is map knowledge. You need to understand where to put cades that Xenos know that they can flank through, and where to use the terrain to your advantage. So just here I could put a cade, or I could just weld. And with that, I've secured the flank for a bit until somebody decides to come over and acid it. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good day.